Welcome to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, show 35. In our last episode, we talked with guest Rachel Peterson on the importance of creating relationships and getting to know your customers. Today, we're chatting on implementing systems and processes in your business. Welcome to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, where we bring you real-life strategies on starting and growing a business and finding financial freedom without sacrificing the life you have with your loved ones. We are your hosts, Tom and Ariana Sylvester, and we are married, we're parents, and we're serial entrepreneurs. This podcast is for those who want more out of life. We'll show you how to take the vision you have and create the business that will help you achieve it. Join us as we share practical steps, real-life stories, and help you become a lifestyle builder.
Oh, I love this topic.
I know you do. And we promised on the episode before, that we would be diving a little bit deeper into this because not only is it your zone of genius, it's also a struggle that we see a lot of entrepreneurs have is how to even begin.
Well, that is so critical.
Yes, it is very critical because let's talk about how sometimes bad systems can equal bad situations.
Yeah, literally.
We've got an example of your appendix story. When we were in college, you had pain in your abdomen, and I kept saying, like, what if it's your appendix? What if it's your appendix? You ended up going to the...
And I was like, no, I'm good.
No, I'm good. I'm like, okay. Man who never wants to go to the doctor. You ended up going to the campus health center, and I remember being in class, and all of a sudden I feel this tap on my shoulder, and it was you. And you were like, yeah, they told me I need to go to the hospital. And I was like, what?
Yeah, they're like emergency surgery. Like they need to get in and take your appendix out.
Pretty much, yeah. So luckily I had my vehicle. We took you right to the emergency room. When we got to the emergency room, that was another story.
Oh, yeah.
Not only did they take all the x-rays, do all the tests.
Multiple times,
and still didn't think it was your appendix. But then they had a shift change, and the new doctor came in, took one look at your x-rays, and was like, your appendix is about to burst. We need to get you into surgery.
She actually showed it on the x-ray, and I was like, oh, yeah, I see it right there.
Yep.
Apparently.
So in that whole hours of being at the hospital, we were in college, which was 2 hours away from home. So I was there by myself. Then we had like your roommate stopped in, and we had some friends who came and like brought me food and sat while we kind of waited to hear what was happening. And when they came out and said, oh, it is the appendix, we're going to prep him for surgery. I remember I was able to come back and sit with you. While I was back there sitting with you, your mother called the hospital and was trying to find out what was going on. I had my phone off, so she couldn't call me. The hospital told her that you had been discharged and sent home because somewhere in their process, they hadn't updated their computer system to show that you were moving rooms, not that you were leaving.
Yep. So I think the receptionist or whatever probably looked over to where I was, saw that I wasn't there, and said, oh, but you must have gone home.
Yep, just assumed.
So while I'm getting prepped for surgery, basically because they think my appendix is going to burst.
Your parents are just at home chilling, thinking like, oh, it's fine. He went home.
Tom went home. Yeah, that's fine.
And then I called your mom after you went in for surgery and was like, they're just taking him back for surgery now. And she was like, what? What are you talking about? She was freaking out.
Yeah.
Because she thought you were okay and went home.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily in that case, I mean, one, they had the shift change. So the new doctor came in and found it because otherwise it could have burst and led to a bunch of issues. But then two, you know, it wasn't necessarily life or death. But I mean, there's literally, you think about it, there's systems that run the entire world. And, you know, when there's a plane crash or when, you know, something bad happens, oftentimes like this literally could be a case of life or death. Now, thankfully, and probably most of the businesses that our listeners are running, it's not going to be that. But this is obviously a very important topic.
It could be life or death for your business, though.
It could be for a variety of reasons. Absolutely. So I want to dive in and just talk a little bit first about why we do this and what the benefit is, because I hear time and time again, I don't need systems. I don't have time for systems. I don't even know what systems are. You're such a geek for talking about systems.
I'm sure no one's ever said that.
I was going to say,
verbatim.
maybe not the last piece, but the first three they always say. And, you know, the first thing actually that I always tell people, first off, you're looking for effectiveness. And I'm actually going to tell people at the beginning, you don't actually want to put a system or spend a lot of time putting a process in place until you basically figure out what the process is and kind of get it working. And this is especially important early on in your business or when you do something new, because things are going to change all the time.
Yep.
So early on, you don't want to spend a time putting a lot of processes in place that's going to delay you from either confirming your business model or making sales or doing the things you need to do.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, things are going to evolve.
Yeah.
So something that's effective when you're getting started may not be effective 6 months down the road. So you don't want to go and put a full process in place for that thing, because 6 months from now, it may change and it's not going to be effective
Or
anymore.
you may not even be doing that
Or
thing
you may
anymore.
not be doing it.
So there's a term out there called premature optimization. And basically what that's saying is that you don't want to optimize something too early.
Yep.
Because what tends to happen, like let's say you went and you put a full process in place for something, and then something changed in that process. You now have reworked because you got to go back and change the entire process. What you want to do is kind of get things working effectively, and they're going to be a little bit chaotic, but effectiveness means that you're doing the right thing.
Yep.
You may not be doing it in the most efficient way, but you're at least doing
Right now.
Yeah, right now.
Yes.
There's a great quote out there, and I probably should have grabbed it before the episode. There's a couple of them, but one thing is there's nothing worse than doing efficiently something that shouldn't be done in the first place. And what I find a lot of people doing is when they put efficiency before effectiveness, they're actually making a process more efficient that either they shouldn't be doing, or it's too soon to make it efficient because it's not yet effective.
Yep.
But when you get things effective, and when you have an effective process, which we'll talk about then being efficient later on, what that's ultimately going to do is give you more revenue in your business because you're focused on the right thing, and then eventually you're going to make that more efficient.
Yep. There's a lot of E words in there.
E. Well, I was gonna say, so in one of the prior episodes, we talked about the E myth, right? So E. We're just going with it.
Lots of E's. It's cool. So basically, when you are getting started, all you want to worry about is that what you're doing is effective. Because a lot of people talk about like, oh, I need a process so that I'm being more efficient. Yeah, at some point, yes, you do. But as Tom said, if you have that premature optimization, you're actually going to hurt yourself in the long run instead of helping yourself. So yes, processes are good, but there are a lot of different levels of how complex your processes can be. So when you're getting started, you either may not have a process yet, or it may be a very, very simplified process, because all you're going to worry about is that it's effective and that it's getting done what you need to get done.
Yeah, like here's a great example. We always talk to people and we say, at the very beginning of your business, you don't want to focus on a logo or a website or a lot of that stuff. You want to focus on proving and validating your business model.
Yep.
And your idea. So if someone was to go and put a content calendar together or a process for creating all of their content, what they're doing is
some people do, because that's what you're told.
Which a lot of people do
in the industry.
But here's the problem. You shouldn't even be worrying about creating content at that point. So by putting a process together and making a very efficient content calendar, so it may be a very efficient process, but it's the wrong thing to be doing at that time in your business.
So it's not going to be effective.
Correct.
You're doing work that may not actually result in what you're trying to do in your business.
And that's what a lot of people run into. They're like, ooh, I just hammered out this blog post, or I just did all these things. And it's like, well, great, but is that getting you to your goal? And depending on what level of your business you're at, it's not even the thing you should be working on.
Yeah, because writing a blog post is not going to be effective if your audience doesn't care about what you wrote about.
Correct. If you're hitting the wrong topic,
or if you don't have the
else.
right keywords or the right content within your blog post. Yeah, I mean, there are so many people who write for a very long time, and they have a blog that they've had for years, and until they nail their business and what their customers and their audience wants, none of what they wrote before may actually be relevant.
Correct.
So you're wasting all, I mean, maybe not wasting if you enjoy writing and you like having that out there, but effectively you're not doing what your business is supposed to be doing. You're not collecting audience and ideal clients by the use of that content. It's just out there.
Yep.
It's just floating. So you don't want to go and spend hours upon hours in writing all of this stuff unless you know that at some point it is going to be an effective way of bringing traffic in to your website.
Yep. So now let's kind of shift. So let's say that you've figured out how to be effective. Let's say, for example,
your business is working.
Yeah. Let's say, for example, early on, you couldn't figure out how to make sales, and then you did figure out how to make sales. And what you were doing was you had a process where you were reaching out to people, and then you did another step, and then you did another step, and you got your first 10 customers that way. So it may not have been the most efficient process because you had to manually reach out and you were kind of working them through, but it proved effective because you got sales. Yeah. So now what we want to shift into is basically saying, okay, I know my process is effective. Now let's make it efficient. And what you're going to be doing there is basically saying, okay, I need to then cut out all of the waste and kind of make this standard so that I'm doing the effective process, but I don't have the extra time. I don't have the extra issues and the other stuff related to, having a process with too many steps or that type of thing.
And this is often where people talk about using automation to make your effective process more efficient. Mm-hmm. So you'll see a lot of people out there, if you are in the service-based business, a lot of it is reaching out to people, talking to your potential customers one-on-one. A way that a lot of people automate that and make it easier is having some sort of form for people to fill out that predetermines who is an ideal client and who is not. Mm-hmm. So before you set up 20 discovery calls with people who may or may not be good potential clients, now you have this predetermined form and application that they fill out before they even get to book a discovery call with you. Yep. So now you may be taking your 20 calls down to 10 calls, but those 10 calls are people who are extremely relevant to your business and what you are selling.
Yeah. And a thing that a lot of people always push back on when I recommend this is, there's a great quote out there called nail it before you scale it. And so when I'm working with people, oftentimes what I'll have them do is to do something not efficiently, intentionally at the beginning, mm-hmm. because we don't want to spend time trying to optimize that thing. Yep. So you're going to do it manually, and it's going to take you some extra time, but it's really going to allow you to figure out what works and what doesn't. And then to your point, once you put some automation in place, then you end up saving a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And that's the huge thing with this. It's, it's saving time, it's saving money, and then it's freeing you up to be able to do something else. Yep. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, because they're in the middle of all their processes because they haven't really made the process out of it, and they haven't, made it efficient so that it's not taking a lot of their time, or if they delegate it out, that they've got that time back to then do the more valuable tasks in their business.
Yeah, and I know we're going to touch on this more in one of our future episodes, but one of the biggest struggles I see when people have hired their first assistant or hired their first contractor within their business is they'll say, well, things aren't getting done the way that they're supposed to, or I feel like this partnership isn't working the way I wanted it to, or I thought it would. And a lot of times it's because people have skipped to trying to be efficient before they've figured out the effectiveness. So as Tom said, making you go through a process manually, while it is tedious and time consuming, actually forces you to figure out what pieces of that process are working or aren't working. So before you go and hire someone and pay them money for the work they're doing, and if there's miscommunication between you two, or if the process isn't actually as effective as you thought it was and they're trying to do it that way, then you're not paying for somebody to not get the results you want. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are, I feel like I didn't hire well, and it's such a hard process and all of that. The honest truth is, if you take that little extra time to go through your own processes and make sure that they are effective, and you write them out, when you go to hire someone or delegate that task out, it is much more likely that it will become a very efficient process after that fact.
Yeah. And I mean, so here's the beautiful thing. People are like, oh yeah, that's great, but why do I care about this? Ultimately, this leads to being more profitable, mm-hmm. because if you don't have systems and processes in your business that are both effective and efficient, you're going to hit a plateau and you're not going to be able to grow your business anymore. You're going to be more stressed out. But as you start putting these things in place, this is what allows you to do more with less. This is what allows you to free up your time to work on the valuable
doesn't
activities.
everyone talk about the 4-Hour Workweek book?
Yeah.
And that's what they're striving for, to work less and make more. You can't do that if you don't have effective and efficient processes.
Correct. And I mean, like, so a lot of people get caught on the title of that book, like 4-Hour Workweek. And Tim Ferriss even says, like, it's not about working 4 hours. That whole book is really about systems and then specifically outsourcing. So in order to, quote unquote, live the 4-Hour Workweek, you're going to go through and do this stuff that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But, you know, what I want to talk about next is really, how do we get started with this?
Everyone
Because
always says that.
I
I don't
think
know
that's
how
the
to do
challenge.
it. I don't even know how to start to get into creating systems and processes in my business.
Yeah, and then to be honest, a lot of people use these as excuses.
It's true.
So what I actually want to do is we ran a special co-working session
Yep.
with our lifestyle builders.
Yeah, we chatted
So,
about it a little bit on our second to last episode.
Yeah.
I don't know, 33.
Yeah. But what I want to do is basically run people through kind of what we did in that workshop for our lifestyle builders, so that all of you guys listening can basically go through the same process if you want. And the first thing that we basically had them do was to look at their business from like a 30,000 foot level, because we want to kind of get that big picture view. Like, think of your business as like a machine, right? And you want to be able to see, okay, from the highest level, what are the major pieces of this machine that make it work, right? Like, I mean, okay, let's think about like a car, right? So if you look at the big picture, there's a lot of different systems and subsystems in a car that make it work. But if you take a look at the big picture, it's like, okay, well, there's the engine, right? Then there's the wheels, you know, so there's different pieces of the car that are all in kind of the body. So what you want to do for your business is you want to say, what are the core processes? And for us, we put these in 4 different buckets. So the first bucket is really your vision and strategy. So this is, how do you come up with the vision for your business, the strategy to achieve that, and then basically check in and continue refining that. So that's the first piece. And like, so for us, what we do is we have an annual planning session, and then we have quarterly planning sessions. And in those, we check in to say, is our vision still correct? We lay out our roadmap of goals that we're going to be doing. And then we reflect and say, what went well, what didn't go well, and what do we plan out next? So that's kind of the major strategy process. And then there's 3 other kind of sub processes that every business is composed of, right?
Yep. So you've got marketing and sales, then you've got your operations, and then the one that no one wants to ever have to deal with is the finances.
Well, I was gonna say, usually the first one and the last one are what everyone avoids.
Yes.
Like, most people say the operations, which is basically saying I get to create my product and I get to deliver it. That's
Yep.
what most people like to focus on.
Yep.
What people want to avoid typically is they don't like marketing and sales, and they don't like dealing with the money. But essentially, marketing is, how do you get your message out to people, right? So what's the basic process that you use to get your message out to people and let them know what you have and how you can help them?
Yep.
Sales is then, okay, how do I convert those people into paying customers so I can make money? Operations is, how do I create and deliver my product? And then how do I keep my customers happy?
How do I run the business?
Yeah. And then finance is basically, how do I keep track of all the money? How do I make sure that, you know, the money's going to the right places? And then ultimately using that to then inform my strategy and what else I'm doing.
Yep.
So what we usually have people do is, to start, is think of that as the 30,000 foot view, and look at your business and say, what are those major pieces or those major cogs that all fit together to make your business run?
And I mean, to be totally honest, there are a lot of people out there that don't have core processes for some of this stuff. So don't feel alone if you're like, oh my God, I don't have a process for managing my money. This is something that we come across a lot, but it is something to work on, because you do want to have a simple core process in place for how you're dealing with and managing all of those things.
Yeah, and one of the things that we did in the workshop was we have a template. It's a 1-page template. Like, I'm a big fan of keeping things simple, right? So we have a 1-page template that basically we had everybody fill out, that gave them spots for each of those processes, and then had them define what it is for them. And we even gave them an example.
Yep.
Is basically what we just ran through. But that's so that you guys can at least get a starting point and say, at that highest level, if I was going to explain to somebody else how my business runs, you could kind of walk through and say, these are the core things that we do that makes the engine run.
Yep.
But then the thing is, once you get the processes in place, it doesn't mean you're done. And
Correct.
It doesn't mean that that's the only time you're ever going to identify them. What we like to do is always work on improving processes.
Yeah, and breaking it down into, like, a lot of people jump to the detailed parts of processes. Like, oh, well, then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. The reason we have you do the core processes is because we want you to have that overview. And then after you've done your core processes, you've mapped those bigger picture processes out, then you bring it back into what are the actual day-to-day processes that you're using in your business.
Yep. And I mean, the big thing here, one of the core things, like whenever I go to a business and I'm working with them, what I tell them is the most important thing is your process for your processes. And basically what that is, from time to time, you want to do reviews or reflections. What went well, what didn't go well, and what changes can we make to make things better? Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about that, if you're continuously improving your processes, over time, your business is just going to get better and better, which means less stress for you.
Yep.
So the times we like to do that are really at those 90-day planning sessions where we reflect back and say, what were some major challenges or major failures in our processes that we can improve? Yep. And then even every week.
Yeah, usually there's at least one on a weekly basis where we're like, this is one of our processes where maybe we could tweak something to make it work a little bit better, because right now it's not as efficient as it could be, or it's not as effective as it could be.
Yeah, well, and oftentimes, when we get to that weekly meeting, we say, all right, what went well, what wins do we have? And then, what didn't go so well, what challenges do we have? And oftentimes those challenges can then be resolved by changing the process.
Or creating a process.
Yeah, so it's a great opportunity. And what's nice about this too, a lot of people complain about not having time to do this. Mm-hmm. This doesn't say, like, I got to shut my business down and I got to map out all of these processes. This is basically saying, what's the biggest pain? What's the biggest frustration you have right now? And every week we're going to spend a little bit of time to put that process in place so that you immediately have less pain in that area.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, it's a little bit addictive once you do it the first time. You're like, this is quite empowering. I am in control over the processes in my business, and I can save myself time, or I can save myself money by making this process work better. So once you've done it that first time or those first couple times, it's going to become less intimidating, because you're like, oh, well, that was simple. That wasn't as hard as I thought. And it's going to become so empowering to you to be able to take that control of your business and improve it, that I have a feeling most people, once they get started with this process, are going to be like, ooh, now I want to go and fix all the processes. So obviously it's not, as Tom said, you don't want to shut your business down and be like, ooh, all the processes today. But it is something that you can work into your weekly tasks and say, like, I want to improve one process every week. And just put that in your goals. And as your business grows and as you're working through things, you will eventually have a process in place for everything that you do in your business.
Yeah, and I gotta say, when we were doing this, the session with the lifestyle builders, what was so cool was just immediately how much they changed. Because as we were kind of describing this, people were like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't have any processes. And then a half hour later, once we had them start implementing, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Like, why haven't I done this before? Like, this has helped so much.
Or I've known I needed to do this for years.
Yeah, and then even like the following week, like, people were then out making more of these processes and then just sharing like how much easier and how much lighter things felt once they had these in place.
Yep.
All right, so we've talked about like the 30,000 foot view. Now let's go down to actually say, how do we document a process for just anything that you would have in your business? And really, these are going to be sub processes to the core processes we talked about. So if you can visualize that, when you create, like the example we use for people is how to create a podcast.
Yep.
Like, we walk through the whole process that we use to create these episodes. And that's really a sub process of marketing, because the podcast for us is a way to get people aware of what we do, obviously help people, but then say, hey, if you like this stuff and you would like us to help more, we do have different ways that we can help you grow your business. So for us, the podcast process is a sub process of marketing.
Yep.
But with this, so basically the process that we take people through is we then want to go from a 30,000 foot view down to maybe a 10,000 foot view. And what you're going to do here is basically say, okay, what is the trigger for the process, right? Like, so for the podcast, the trigger might be we have less than 2 months of episodes recorded. So we want to start creating new episodes to make sure that we're far enough ahead.
Yep.
And then you're going to go through basically what are the 3 to 5 major steps that take you to that process being finished.
Yep. So the first main step is to create the notes.
Yeah.
So the sub steps underneath that would be to make sure that the schedule itself is booked out so we know what we're creating notes on.
Yep.
And to research or prepare those notes.
Yep. And so the key thing when you're doing this 10,000 foot view is that you don't want to get too caught up in all those sub steps you just defined. So we're going to do those next.
Yep.
But so like you said, the first major step is you create the schedule and you create the notes for the show. What are we going to talk about?
Yep.
The next major step might be actually recording the show. The next major step after that is going to be editing the show. The next major step would be then all the marketing and putting the show notes page together, right? And then finally you're done when the episode has been released and everything is done.
Yep.
So what you're basically going to do is it's going to start with a trigger, what kicks the process off, what are the 3 to 5 major steps to go through the process, and then the end, what causes that process to be complete, and then we can move on.
Yep.
So that's the 10,000 foot view.
Then you get into what I started a little bit early is those sub steps.
Yep. And the whole reason that I want to call that out is because what tends to happen when people go to create this, they start getting into the sub steps and they dive into the details and then almost forget the big picture of what the major steps are, and it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, when you define the main steps first, because those are, in order to get to the end, you have to get through each of those steps. So you have your trigger, then what has to happen next, then what has to happen next. But it's the overview of that process.
Yep.
The sub steps, you even want to keep those as concise as possible because you don't want to be nitty gritty with the details. Like if I'm saying I'm going to research some potential topics to talk about, I'm not going to tell you like I'm going to go to Google and search in the search bar and type in the keywords and click on the links to then read the blog posts to then do my research. Yeah. I'm just going to say research for show notes creation. So you want to keep it, obviously you've got your main steps across the top. Your sub steps are going to be slightly more detailed, but even then you don't want to be nitty gritty with like step 1.1, step 1.2.
Yeah, well, and so 2 things on that. One, this might be a little difficult for people just listening to kind of visualize.
Correct.
So what we'll do is we'll actually put an example of one of these process templates on the website. So you guys can get that at tomandariana.com/35. And we'll actually show the podcast one that we're talking through.
Yes.
So you guys can see how this is all kind of pulled together. But so now as you go down to like the sub steps, on your trigger, so like when something kicks it off, one of the first things you look at is then, okay, what inputs do you need, right? So what information do you need to be able to start the process? So with the podcast, you might need that schedule, right? Or you might need some other information. Then you go into, okay, step 1 was to create the show notes or the basically what we're going to talk about. So then you've got sub steps there that are going to be like, okay, what are the key things involved in creating the show notes? So you're going to, take the template for show notes and create it. You're going to fill it out with the details and the core topics that we're going to talk about for the show. Right. Then when we get into the next step, it's step 2. We're going to be talking about, okay, how do we actually record the show? So there's going to be steps like, we're going to
time aside in the calendar.
Yep, we're going to schedule
and
it. We're going to set up
all the tech.
equipment. Yep. And so we're going to keep going through this. And now what you're seeing is that we've got the major steps, and then below those we have the key steps required to then complete that and move to the next one. And then finally what we're going to do is we're going to get to the end where we've completed the process. And the final thing we want to look at is, are there any post steps that are required? Because what tends to happen is people will finish a process like 95%, but there's a couple lingering things hanging out there. And then what that does is it weighs on people's minds. So you want to say, okay, once things have been published, is there anything we got to do to basically close this down and say it's truly done? It's 100% done.
Yep.
And then so that's basically the process for creating a process. And when you go through that,
I'm so quoting you on this.
I know. The first time is probably going to be wrong. But then your next step after this is next time you do this process, you're going to follow what you just came up with. And what you're going to find is that it was wrong.
You
it was
missed
missing a
steps.
step. The steps were out of order. So then what we do like on this template is at the bottom we have notes. And basically what you want to do is make notes of what has to change in the process. And once you do this a couple times, you'll probably get the process nailed for the most part. And then you're not going to have a lot of changes to it. But what we've done at this point, if you guys are kind of following through what we've done, we've made the process effective first. We've made sure it kind of worked. And then we can go and say, how do we now start making it more efficient by utilizing tools, by removing wasteful steps, etc.
Yeah, and I want to point out what you just said there, by using tools. When we do this stuff, we are not trying to use tools. We are keeping it super, super simple, using a pen and paper, using a whiteboard, anything that you can just quickly jot stuff down. It's not written in stone. And you're just getting it out there. And the reason we want you to do that is because, as Tom said, you want to make sure it's effective before you work on the efficiencies part. Tools go hand in hand with efficiency. So you don't want to be efficient first by saying, oh, I'm going to use this tool for this process, because then you're trying to fit the tool to a process that you haven't even made effective yet. So you're going backwards. What you want to do is make the process effective, and then you find a tool that's actually going to help you make it efficient. So many tools are available for this type of stuff, but if your process doesn't match how that tool functions, you're screwing yourself over a little bit. You're making it harder than it needs to be, and your processes may not be as efficient as they should be. So do the paper version first, or the whiteboard version first. As you get that process down and you say, this is as effective as I can make it, and now I want to make it efficient, you go and find a tool that works for you. So it could be a simple tool like Trello or some sort of project management tool. It could be something more complex than that, where you're paying for a tool that does specific things. But you want to get the process down first.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest issues that I saw a lot of companies run into was, like, let's say, for example, they were hiring me in to help them implement like an agile process. They would say, all right, Tom, we already bought this agile tool, and then we want you to show us how to use it and how to make it, more effective. And what they did was basically went backwards. So they bought a tool, and then they were trying to define their process based on the tool.
Yep.
What I recommend most companies do is you actually start first with the people. So do we have the right people? Are
they in the right roles?
Yeah, are they in the right roles? Do they have the right mindset? Do they understand kind of, where we're going? And then you get to like the strategy. So where is it that we're going? What's that big picture? How do we think we're going to get there? And you want to make sure everybody understands that. Then you put the processes in place that will support getting to the strategy. Mm-hmm. And then once you have the processes in place, then you, like you said, pick the right tool to make the processes more efficient.
Yep.
But most people end up doing that backwards and then spend a lot of money on tools, get confused because the tools make it more complicated. So as you said, like what we told all of our lifestyle builders, you've got this template. Like, we want you to fill the process out and then print it out. And the first time you use it, you're just going to use the paper template and you're going to check things off when they're done. Like sometimes we'll just have people use Post-it notes and a wall, but you want to use the simplest thing because you don't want the technology to confuse the process at the beginning. You want to keep it simple, make the process work. And then what you can do is pick the right tool, because you might pick the wrong tool at the beginning and then it makes everything else more difficult.
Yep. And you're paying money for something you can't even use.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Homework. Whew. I think my homework is going to be really simple, and just to hit up the show notes page and check out that example of the processes broken down, so that you can see the core processes, the example of how those are written, and then look at the process of like our podcast and how we go through that, just so that you can get an idea of all of the mumbo jumbo that Tom just talked about in this episode on a simpler level.
Yeah. And so once you do that and you kind of see an example of it, my homework is going to be think of something that has been a challenge or just isn't working in your business. And I want you to then create your first process for that. And, carve out a little bit of time, but this shouldn't take too long. I mean, you shouldn't spend any more than probably 30 minutes on this max. But then what that's going to allow you to do is to follow that process next time. And if you do that, you're going to find where the issues are. We had people, even when they were first doing this, they were like, I can't make the process. There's too many variations and whatever else. And immediately what we saw was that it was so complicated, and that's what was causing, them the issue. So, take that template basically that we're doing and then make your first process.
Yep. I like it.
Okay.
All right. What's the bookshelf for today?
All right. So the bookshelf for today is a book called Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You. And, I think most of the other books that we've talked about previously have also tied into this. So we mentioned like the 4-Hour Work Week. We mentioned the E-Myth. I think we mentioned Traction. Those are all also good books. They touch on processes in a different way. This is a novel, like some of the other books, which basically kind of tells the story of a company. And there's some key takeaways from this. And then at the end of it, there's also kind of more direct insights. But the main tenet of this is think about what would it require to sell your business. If somebody was going to come in and buy it, how would you organize the business that way? And what this will allow you to do is start thinking about systems, start thinking about processes. And what's funny is that a lot of times when people get burnt out, they're like, I want to sell my business or I want to close it. And what we end up working them through is getting it set up so it can basically run without them. And you know what's funny? When you help somebody that's ready to sell their business because it's too stressful and taking too much time, but you set it up so it can run without them, suddenly they don't want to sell it anymore. So what you guys want to be doing is thinking about how do you set your business up so that it can be ready to sell and somebody could buy it. And if you do that, you're going to be implementing a lot of these things. So this is a really good book to kind of get you more into that mindset and then also give you some of the practical pieces that will help you with that.
Yeah, and I know we're hitting on some really heavy topics these last couple episodes. So what we'll do for you to kind of help you just dive deeper into this stuff is we'll send you over to a blog post that we wrote about just the different strategies that will help you implement processes in your business.
Yeah, well, and to that point too, so we're now getting into the core of what really makes businesses work. And, obviously, if you guys are listening to this, you're aware that we have our Lifestyle Builders mentorship. If this is something that is speaking to you, what we're talking about these last couple episodes, I would highly invite you guys to come and join us because it's a very low-cost mentorship program. We put that in place specifically so that we can help more entrepreneurs and more business owners. But we dive into all this stuff. We have Q&As where we go through. We have feedback where we help you guys with this. We have trainings like the training that we just walked through. So if you're shaking your head as we're going through this, highly recommend you guys at least just check out Lifestyle Builders, and you guys can do that by going to joinlifestylebuilders.com.
All right, and we will obviously include links to all of this in the show notes at tomandariana.com/35. All right, it's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders.
And as always, it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Woo! Are you frustrated by a lack of momentum in your business? Do you want real-time guidance and support from seasoned entrepreneurs who really care about your results? If you're nodding your head or awkwardly shouting yes in public somewhere, then we invite you to join Lifestyle Builders, a mentorship program designed to meet you where you are and give you strategic and custom guidance so you can build the business you need for the life you crave. You can find out more at joinlifestylebuilders.com.
Your life, your business, your way. Join Family Entrepreneur Life. Join Family Entrepreneur